William Jackson is no longer a member of the Washington Commanders, but did the team get good value for the once highly sought after cornerback? We're going to tell you why they did, and we'll recap a crazy NFL trade deadline, all of that right now on the Locked On Commanders podcast.
Your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Commanders fans? Welcome to the Locked On Commanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, and we are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube and the WUSA 9 Plus app on your Roku or Amazon Fire Stick. And of course, thank you for making us your first listener, your first view of the day. I'm David Harrison. My co-host is Chris the Rooster Russell. Both of us are credentialed members of the media covering your Commanders. Chris is doing it for the Team 980, where you can find he and Pete Medhurst live from 9 a.m. to noon Eastern, Monday through Friday, or anytime on the Audacy app. And me, I'm doing it for Commander Country, where I'm a writer for Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation.
Yes, indeed. We thank you for making us your first listen and first view of the day. Today's episode of Locked On Commanders, David, is presented by our friends at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. Pick between 2 and 5 players. If they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on your entry. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code Locked On. That's prizepicks.com, promo code Locked On. So, David, as you said during the intro, William Jackson III no longer a member of the Washington Commanders. That not a shock. He's traded to the Pittsburgh Steelers for a reported exchange of 2025. That's right. It's 2022 right now as we speak. 2025 conditional draft picks in the 6th and the 7th rounds with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Basically, a ham sandwich would basically have more value at this point. The deal, again, is not about what they get in return. The Commanders are getting rid of a bad fit. They're very likely going to have to absorb a $9 million dead cap hit in 2023. The Steelers are going to basically pay the remainder of Jackson's base salary, the way I understand it, almost $3 million for this year. But David, besides all that, clearly this is the worst free agent signing by far of the Ron Rivera regime. But why? Why didn't it work out in your eyes?
Yeah, so I think it's a good place to start. So obviously William Jackson leaving the team, it didn't work, right? That's the reason these things happen. And I think that's a good place to start to dive in. And I think the up front, right, the very grassroots of it is it's not a scheme fit. And William Jackson, he's known as a physical cornerback, right? He likes to play up by the line of scrimmage. He likes to play physical brand of football. Well, in order to do that as a defensive back, you have to do it within a certain amount of yards. And we know what the rule is, right? But there's, the NFL officials give you a bit of leeway. But where that leeway is not going to exist, Chris, is 10, 12, 15 yards downfield. And that's where a lot of these penalties for William Jackson have come in to bite the Commanders in the butt, is downfield passes where he's still playing that physical brand of football. I think bottom line is William Jackson is a defensive back who wins at the line of scrimmage. He wins by disrupting the wide receiver's release, which disrupts the timing of the route, which gets quarterback off rhythm, out of sync, out of time, or off time, allows the pass rush to get home. And that is how a guy like William Jackson wins. The way that the Washington Commanders asked William Jackson to play was to play deeper, basically catch the routes, run with the route later in the route, either in the stem or through the break, and play a brand of football that he is not accustomed to, which is why he got beat, which is why he gave up a lot of catches, which is why he also was out of position on a lot of plays, especially that terrible, terrible touchdown where he's basically just standing in the middle of nowhere covering nothing while his opponent is scoring a touchdown, and why you have so many penalties downfield because of the way that William Jackson plays football.
Yeah, I mean, I largely agree with everything you just said. Obviously, a bad fit, but Ron Rivera has actually already spoken about the trade to JP Finley of NBC Sports Washington and 106.7 The Fan. He gets an exclusive interview as part of a TV marketing deal that the team has with the network. So I thought it would be worth our time to get initially and to read the transcribed quote from Nikki Javala, actually, of the Washington Post. He said, JP asked him, how did you guys arrive at this decision to trade William Jackson III? He said, quote, I think the biggest thing is, more so than anything else, is we looked at what we tried to do with William and it didn't work. Quite honestly, we didn't find the fit that we were hoping to find. We were looking for a guy that had a specific skill set that could understand the match coverages and play the match coverages the way we do with everybody else. And he struggled with it because he really is a man coverage type of guy. So along the lines, during our evaluation process, we were wrong. He also admitted, look, it's the business of pro football. Sometimes you get it right. Sometimes you get it wrong. And when you get it wrong, you recognize it. He said, realize it and time to move on. He said some other things, and certainly he'll speak more to you guys on Wednesday out in Ashburn at the team facility. But David, right there is the heart of this, right? What you said, and you're absolutely right about the man press stuff and all that. That's what William Jackson played. That's why it was a kind of a curious fit in some people's eyes from the beginning, because Ron Rivera was a cover 3 corner type coach in Carolina. Jack Del Rio had largely played a lot of zone coverages. I had heard back before they signed William Jackson and before they drafted Benjamin St-Juste that they wanted to play more man coverages. So I thought, oh, okay, they're trying to change their philosophy because of the pass rush and the talent that they have. They're trying to crank it up. They're trying to play a different style than maybe traditionally a lot of teams have, which is, again, about 2/3 zone, somewhere in that range. Right. They're trying to play something different than what they've even largely coached, right? Yeah. Yep. And maybe they did, David, but it just didn't work out for whatever reason. One other thing that I'll add, when Ron says the match, I've heard that term. I've talked to some people on the inside, and they describe it to me. And I don't know if you've heard the same thing, so correct me if I'm wrong. Their match system basically looks like man coverage, but it's a zone. And I think that's what Ron is getting at. No. We were going to continue to play zone, but it was a match system as opposed to a pure man system.
Right. And when you're talking about coverages, right? And look, there's a school of thought for everything. So for everything that we say, there's a coach out there that will say something different. So I want everybody to understand, like, you're talking about just kind of nuances here, right? But for the most part, generally speaking, at some point, everything becomes man coverage. Like, that's just the way that football works. Even in a zone, if a guy enters your zone and he's alone, you attach yourself to that guy. Now you're in man coverage, right? For the sake of argument. The difference between what you usually call a zone scheme and a man scheme is what happens at the snap. In a zone scheme, at the snap, the DBs are eyes on the quarterback, eyes in front of them, watching what's coming through their zone. And then you attach to what is in your zone and you cover that until it either leaves your zone or something more pressing based on your responsibilities enters your zone. So that's kind of the difference. In man coverage, what we call man coverage, you're locked in on a guy from the jump. You know what I mean? And some guys are better in one thing than another. So yeah, even zone coverage eventually becomes man. And I think that's where Washington thought they saw they could win with a guy like William Jackson, not understanding just how much he was going to need to rely on winning early, which requires him to be physical at the line of scrimmage, which is where you get the difference between zone and man coverage. So yeah, I mean, it's not an exact science. And, it opens the door to me, a curiosity of what happens in the negotiating room, what happens in the meetings and the conversations, because I feel like, there's a disconnect here where a player is expected to do one thing, has never really done that thing. William Jackson, the last time we really got to talk to him in the locker room, basically said that he was still trying to learn what they're asking him to do in this zone coverage scheme. So why didn't those issues or those questions potentially come up? And, look, if the Washington Commanders sitting here saying, hey, Will, we want to give you this much money to do this, do you think you pull that off for us? It's hard for him to say, no, coach, I don't think I can do that for you. Thanks for the offer. No, he's going to say, of course I can do that. And that's the mind of an athlete. I think the bottom line, though, and I want to kind of leave it with this, and this is just my experience, and it's only this season. So again, grain of salt, type of thing. And Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but William Jackson, very personable guy, always willing to talk to the media, very friendly, and even going through this, like, he was frustrated, you know what I mean? But you could see he was doing his best not to let his frustrations out on the media. And that was there either after games, especially when he got benched, or in the locker room after practices. And an effort guy. Never saw him loafing, never saw him taking a play off in practice or in the game. He may have been out of position. I got it right. But as far as effort is concerned, so I just want to make sure it's clear. Like, even though this didn't work and he's on his way out, I don't think this is a situation, at least from where I sit, where we're like just good riddance to a player. And I know the thumbnail on the episode says, if you're on YouTube, it's meant to be humorous, not insulting. So I just want to make that clear, right? This isn't a situation where at least from my standpoint, we're like, get out of here and never come back, and we boo him when he comes back to FedEx. This is just a situation where a coaching staff and a player just did not match.
I totally agree. Totally agree. I mean, it's disappointing. It's bitterly disappointing. And the worst part about this, not only that it didn't work out, but the cornerback position is still arguably one of the weaker positions on the team, despite the amount of resources that they invested in it over the last couple of years. And on top of that, they still get left holding the bag on a $9 million dead cap hit, because basically the way the contract was, it was a 3-year contract essentially, but it was spread out to 5 years in terms of avoidable years, right? And at a $3 million per year signing bonus cap hit, that all gets accelerated onto the 2023 cap. Yeah. So that's as simple as we can make it. Speaking of simple, David.
Yeah, something that's going to work for you the way that you expect it to work once you bring it into your organization, which your organization, this is your home security system. If you get it through Simply Safe. If you've thought about securing your home with a home security system but have been putting it off, you're going to want to listen to what I have to tell you right now, because Locked On Commanders listeners can order the #1 rated Simply Safe home security system for 50% off, half off their system. This is their biggest offer of the year, and you won't want to miss it. I love my Simply Safe system because it's mine. Literally, I designed it. Well, my wife and I designed it, and we designed it for the needs of our family and us. And anytime we want to add something, remove something, tweak something, move something, we can do it without a hassle. Simply Safe was named the best home security system of 2022 by U.S. News and World Report for all of the things I just listed. And that was the 3rd year in a row that they earned that distinction. And with the top-rated Simply Safe app, you stay in complete control of your system anytime, anywhere. Arm or disarm it, unlock for a guest, access your cameras, or adjust your system settings. I'm sitting in a hotel in Indianapolis, Indiana, after watching the Washington Commanders win their 3rd straight win, and I can check in on my family, which is fun sometimes, and also just it gives you a nice warm feeling when you're on the road. Don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system I recommend. Get 50% off any new Simply Safe system at simplysafe.com/LockedOnNFL today. This is their biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. Take advantage of it. That's simplysafe.com/LockedOnNFL. There's no safe like Simply Safe.
All right, thanks once again for making the Locked On Commanders podcast your first view and your first listen of the day. For your second listen and watch, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter to the most to the biggest stories in sports, and certainly the NFL trade deadline, one of them. Go beyond the scoreboard and beyond the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. It's funny when you were saying, and you were stuck in Indianapolis, the first thing that went through my mind is the hilarious NCAA Final Four commercial with Charles Barkley, and I think it was Samuel L. Jackson, if everybody remembers that. And they said Indianapolis, and they wound up in Annapolis. I'm sorry, it was the first thing that went through my mind.
That's pretty funny.
It took a lot for me not to crack up. It was a quietly funny moment. In my mind, but anyway, I don't know if anybody knows what I'm talking about, but that's the way.
Look, we got the power of YouTube, so we can find out.
Exactly. All right, David, are you disappointed that the Commanders did not make an addition at the trade deadline? I am, but it was expected for me. I think this is a largely conservative front office, and actually, I think they were really burnt by the William Jackson III signing, the Ryan Fitzpatrick signing, and even last year with the Curtis Samuel signing, and maybe overall. I think they were, 0 for 2.5, maybe half of something out of the big 3 that they signed in free agency last year. Now, a trade is different. Trade is different. I get you. But, you're talking about things have to go right, both injury-wise and production-wise, in order for something to work out.
I'm not really disappointed, to be honest with you. And I think just because you look at what this team needs versus what was out there and available, I think we could all agree, could this team use an upgrade on the offensive line? Absolutely. You know what I mean? But was there a guy available via trade in that market that was going to provide that? No, there was, at least not that we've heard of. being available, right? And then you look at the players who were traded, like Chase Claypool. Huge fan of Chase Claypool. Absolutely loved him coming out of Notre Dame. He's another guy I feel like with the Pittsburgh Steelers just wasn't a good fit for what they thought they were going to get out of him. I think to me he's basically a small, fast tight end, and I think they thought he was going to be more of a field stretcher than he really is. So we'll see how he does, with the Chicago Bears. But I would love Chase Claypool to be on the Commanders just because I want to cover him. But where does he fit? You know what I mean? You're gonna make him your number 4 wide receiver. Like I don't think you're gonna spend a 2nd-round draft pick to trade for him to be your 4th wide receiver behind Jahan Dotson once he's healthy. So I mean, you might like a guy that was available, but as far as expecting the Commanders to pull the trigger on getting that guy, I don't see anywhere where they essentially missed on an opportunity. But real quick, we didn't really get to this in segment 1. So with the trade to William Jackson, though, so you mentioned what they got, but do you like what they got in return?
Well, I mean, it's hard for me to sit here and go, well, a 2025 6th or 7th round pick is something that I value, right? I mean, I guess I do because it could turn out into something. You never know. Cameron Curl was a 7th round pick, right? James Smith-Williams, a 7th round pick. I mean, if you can get me Cameron Curl or James Smith-Williams, then hell, yeah, absolutely. I like what they got. But David, like I said, it's 2022, 2023, 2024. I mean, this is 3 drafts away, and it's a 6th or a 7th round pick based on the conditions being met. This is not exactly like anything that's going to help. In all likelihood, quite honestly, it might not even help this coaching staff.
Yeah, that's I didn't know if you were going to go there, but that's very true. Like this coaching staff, this front office may not even get to spend that draft pick, and this is all kind of writing on the wall. Here's why I like it. And this is why I said in the cold open, they did get good value because everybody in the league knew that if they didn't execute a trade, William Jackson was going to be a free agent. William Jackson was going to hit the waiver wire. And if nobody was willing to trade for him, is even a 7th round draft pick, it's probably the price tag is the reason that they don't want to trade for him. So then he's going to become a free agent, which means he can go wherever he may choose. And if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, quite honestly, you're an attractive spot for him because not only do you run a defensive scheme that seems to fit him very well, you also play against the Cincinnati Bengals twice a year. Now, Teresh pointed out something on Twitter that, he actually doesn't necessarily have the most glowing reputation or relationship with Pittsburgh's current coach there. So that actually Austin, a little bit of a problem. I don't know. I mean, I guess that's their problem now, not ours. But so that'll be interesting. But I think for the Pittsburgh Steelers, you have to be happy because right now you're 4th in the waiver wire order. Are the Detroit Lions going to pull the trigger on them? You don't know. Houston certainly is building for the future. Maybe they do it. Carolina, I don't think they do it. But Pittsburgh basically doesn't want to run the risk. So for Washington, they say, okay, well, we're going to get something out of this. Pittsburgh says, yeah, but let's kick that can down the road. I mean, William Jackson may not even be a Steeler when this comes to roost, right? But I mean, what it does is it gives you a chance to recoup something of value for a player that obviously didn't work. And I mean, the way that these teams like to wheel and deal, I mean, that 6th or 7th round draft pick could be packaged with other things in the future and eventually become maybe a 4th or even a 3rd round draft pick and turn in something very valuable. So it gives you an opportunity. So you get potential where potential was lost. That's why I like this trade.
I wonder if Houston would have put in a claim on him, considering
I think they're the biggest threat to put in a claim ahead of Pittsburgh, honestly. I really do.
And he went to college down there. Not that that's significant, but it's fact. B, I think they play more man press, right? Because Stingley, who they drafted number 3 overall, was a man press corner, right?
Yeah, and Lovie Smith has said, I just happened to do a little bit of writing about the Houston Texans. Lovie Smith has said, like, they're 1-5-1. They are what they are. They are what the record says there, but they are actively looking to build a team to compete. They're not just sitting back and saying, okay, we're going to struggle for a couple of years and maybe we get lucky on some. No, they're actively looking to go out and do some things, which is interesting considering they didn't actually trade Brandon Cooks.
All right. So interesting how that worked out. So at least they got something for him. Elsewhere, quickly, the Giants and Cowboys really didn't do anything. I mean, Jerry Jones was on the radio Tuesday morning promising like a caboose and things. I don't even know what Jerry was talking about. I mean, sometimes I wonder what goes on through his mind. But, the Eagles, of course, last week added Robert Quinn, the pass rusher from Chicago. They did not add Alvin Kamara or anybody anybody really else. Other contenders around the NFC, the 49ers traded away Jeff Wilson. Of course, they had acquired Christian McCaffrey, paid pretty good dividends this past Sunday. Atlanta traded Calvin Ridley to Jacksonville, but he ain't even playing this week. And you mentioned the Chase Claypool going to the Bears at 3-4, but they dumped Roquan Smith in addition to obviously Robert Quinn last week. So I don't know if the rest of the NFC outside of San Francisco, David, and the Eagles got any better. The teams that didn't. Washington is contending with, at least.
Yeah. That's the point. The teams that Washington's contending with for playoff spots, they didn't do anything to get any better than they already are. So I think that's good news for Washington.
Well, one thing that we should point out, the Vikings, I forgot about them. They swung a deal for TJ Hawkinson from Detroit. Guess who comes to FedEx Field this Sunday?
Yeah.
TJ Hawkinson, the Minnesota Vikings, and Kirk Cousins. I forgot to mention that. Speaking of that will be a big game, of course, for the 4-4 Washington Commanders against the 6-1 Minnesota Vikings. We don't know if Ron Rivera is going to coach the rest of the week and in this game because David, of something we're going to have to address as we return here for our final segment on the Locked On Commanders podcast. A couple of sad notes from the world of the NFL. That is next right here on LOC. But first, guys, we're here to tell you about our friends at Prize Picks and prizepicks.com. Here's what you do. You pick between 2 and 5 players, daily fantasy sports. If they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you're going to win. This Thursday night, why don't you do a Philly-Houston double play in both baseball and football? That's right. The Eagles are playing the Texans. We just talked about the Texans. And the Phillies are playing the Astros in the Fall Classic. Say you like Jalen Hurts more than the passing yards and Bryce Harper to have less than his Prize Picks projection in hits. That's all you have to do. Or pick the Houston double side or one of both. You can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. No competing against other people. Download the Prize Picks app right now or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. If you deposit 100, Prize Picks gives you 100. You deposit 50, Prize Picks give you 50. Don't forget to enter the promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match of up to $100. And also, our friends at Bet Online want you to get in the game with them. That's right. Bet Online is your number one source for betting football and, of course, the start of the basketball season. And don't forget, again, said Fall Classic. Now, the Vikings are 3.5-point favorites as of late Tuesday afternoon at FedEx against the Commanders on Sunday. Of course, that can change, as it often does. Find out all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts. Hey, you may have heard of Kirk Cousins. He's returning home to FedEx and Landover, Maryland. The over-under for this Sunday is at 43.5. As always, Bet Online remains your continued source for all your sports wagering information. Live in-game betting parlays and all the action is available to you. So head to the website right now. Use your mobile device to learn more at Bet Online, where the game starts.
All right, guys, wrapping up this episode of the Locked On Commanders podcast. And unfortunately, we're going to end this show on a sad note as the team announced on Tuesday, obviously with the permission of head coach Ron Rivera, that his mother, Dolores, had passed away Monday evening. Of course, Ron Rivera was in California last week, was not there for Wednesday's practice. We spoke to Jack Del Rio instead, and obviously for good reason, spending 2 days. He said he spent 2 days with his mother, so I can only assume Tuesday and Wednesday. He was back there Thursday. So just sad news, Chris. I don't ever know what to say in these moments, to be quite honest with you, because there's nothing, quite honestly, there's nothing David Harris and Chris Russell are going to say to ease what Ron Rivera is going through. So we can only offer up our most sincere condolences. No matter any, coaching agreements, disagreements, management, anything like that all goes out the window. There's a business side to this. There's a human side to this. And you put all the business side stuff in check when things like this happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our heart goes out to Ron and his wife and his daughter and the entire Rivera family. His dad, I know he's very close to his parents. He would always spend, weeks during the summer there. And after the football season, he would always spend some time there. So, clearly everything that you just said is more than appropriate, David. Just on behalf of the podcast and myself and, I don't even know if I told you, I reached out to Ron last Thursday morning, just, wishing him and his mom the very best. I was unaware of how serious it was, quite honestly, and that I don't know if that was, if he knew that was the last time he'd see her or not. These things take on often a crazy path, but we're thinking about you, Ron, and like you said, David, no trade, no free agent signing, no decision, no usage of timeouts, no play call, no whatever means anything when it comes to family. So we're thinking about you, Ron, and again, your entire family. And speaking of another tragic death, and this one's a little maybe harder to explain, David. Mike Zimmer, the former now Vikings head coach, who was just with them until last year, he was fired, and Kevin O'Connell took over, who also makes his return, by the way, to FedEx Field. He used to be the Washington offensive coordinator here. Mike Zimmer, who's out of football this year, he has now lost his son, Adam Zimmer, who was his former co-defensive coordinator in Minnesota, linebackers coach for several years before that. He was serving as an offensive analyst for the Cincinnati Bengals until his death at 38 years old on Monday. Details are still unknown how it happened. And Mike lost his wife, I want to say about 8 or 9 years ago, somewhere, maybe a little bit longer than that, David. And now his son, who is, my understanding, they were very close and, obviously worked together day in, day out for a long time. Right. Again, I don't know how it happened, but football coaching, and David, this, you served in the military, and I know you've lost people that are very, very close to you. And it's a team. It's a unit. You spend often more time with your coaching family than you do with your real family. Well, Mike Zimmer and Adam Zimmer were not only coaching family, but they were father and son.
Yeah.
And I know it has no direct ties to the Washington organization. But I know Jay Gruden would always tell me how great of a coach Mike Zimmer was, and Adam, obviously, I don't know as much about him as I know about Mike, whatever. The point being is, to lose your son at 38 after losing your wife 8-9 years ago is just awful. And it just makes everything we do, everything we think about, everything we operate and live for, even more precious and harder to kind of deal with. So condolences out to the Zimmer family.
Absolutely.
And the Rivera family.
And the Rivera family. Yeah, absolutely. And the only thing you'd hope is that the good memories are plentiful and will outweigh and outlive the grieving.
No doubt about it. All right. And on that note, unfortunately, a sad one, we're going to have to say goodbye, but we want to thank you again for making the Locked On Commanders podcast your first listen and first view of the day. Come on back for the next episode. We'll have a crossover Thursday edition as we get you set for the Minnesota Vikings and the Washington Commanders. Meanwhile, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most, the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and beyond the scenes. Local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today. It's available on YouTube and Audacy and wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to hop in, it's 301-615-3577. That's 301-615-3577 on the voicemail. That's going to do it for us today. Commanders fans, thanks again for joining us. We're free and available on all platforms, and we're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team each and every day. For my partner, David Harrison, covering the Washington Commanders for Commander Country on SI.com's Fan Nation, I'm Chris Russell, one half of the Russell and Medhurst Show on the Team 980 and the Audacy app. We'll be back right here on the Locked On Commanders podcast.